We're gonna make an authentic Cajun meatball fricassee. And as any other Cajun recipe starts, you're gonna have to chop up your trinity. For this one, we used 4 onions, 2 green bell peppers, and 2 stalks of celery. And chopped all of that up and set it in a bowl on the side. You're gonna also use minced garlic, but you don't put that in till later. So I have oatmeal, which is what I use to bind my meatballs, and all of this seasoning and 2 eggs. And you can use whatever you want, but this is 3 pounds of meat. So it's gonna be 2 pounds of ground beef, and I put 1 pound of ground pork. Add the eggs, add all your seasonings. You're probably gonna use about 2 cups of oats. I just eyeball it, but I ended up putting a little bit more in later. Just make your meatballs however you make them. I throw a little bit of everything in there. So, next we're gonna get some gloves on, and I'm gonna make these meatballs, which it takes, oh, that's some T-Boys seasoning, by the way. It takes a good bit of time, like, to make it. We had 2 people doing this recipe, so he was over there starting the roux at this time, which is about a cup of oil and a cup and a quarter about of flour. Sorry, my brain froze. So yeah, now I'm gonna start making these meatballs, which is a little bit time consuming, but it's definitely worth it. This recipe, I think I ended up with 43 meatballs. So yeah, you add the oats as needed. A lot of people, like, if you want to use breadcrumbs, that's fine. It doesn't even matter. Most people have their own way of making meatballs, but that's just the way I make mine. I feel like the oatmeal stretches it. It fills everybody up more. It binds it better. So just gonna form them into little balls, and I think some people use like an ice cream scoop to get them uniform, but I didn't have that, so I just kind of winged it. This recipe does take time, but if you want an authentic fricassee, like an authentic Cajun meatball fricassee like I used to eat when I was a kid, like a lot of other Cajun families eat, you just have to take your time. And we're gonna line all these meatballs onto this baking sheet, and I'm not gonna put them in the oven right away, but they're gonna go in the oven, so I'm popping them in the fridge just for now until we get some of the next steps out of the way. So when you start a roux, it's gonna look funny. It's gonna look like that, but if you just keep on going, and this color right here took us about 30 minutes, that's what it'll end up like. It smooths itself out, and then at that point you just add all those veggies that you chopped up into it, stirring that up, and you're gonna cook that down for quite a while, like another 30 minutes. It's time consuming, but when you get it tender like you see here, then you put the garlic in and you cook it for like another 3 minutes. I guess this is a part where I was watching the Saints game, sorry. Intermission. Oh well, anyway. Okay, at this point, we just keep stirring this, and I'm opening up my can of beef broth, and I also have a container of chicken broth on the side. So we pour that in after you got all the veggies down and after your garlic is done, and mix that all together, smooth it out, then put the chicken broth in. I filled up this thing with water right after this because you may need to add a little bit more water. I think I ended up adding like half of that. And that's also the point where I put the oven on 375, and I'm going to pop the meatballs in just a second. While you're getting the gravy cooked, go ahead and season with whatever you want. I think he might have put a little too much pepper right here, but it came out delicious anyway. And you're going to stir that gravy down as you put your meatballs in the oven. Stir the gravy down and just let it simmer until it comes to a low boil. Putting the meatballs in the oven just gets them cooked enough to where you can put them in the gravy and they don't break up. But you're going to cook the gravy for like a good little while. And then when the meatballs are done, you could take them out, and we're going to add them all into the gravy. So that whole process took like about 30 minutes of letting that simmer and letting the meatballs cook. So we put them all in the gravy, and also we're going to add in all the drippings from the pan. There's not a whole lot of grease in it, but it's some good flavor. If you use like really greasy meat, I wouldn't add all that grease in there, but this was a pretty you know, the content was right, so it wasn't a lot of grease. It was just some drippings. That's just extra flavor. We're gonna stir and just let it sit. After we get everything off the sides, scrape down, let that gravy sit and thicken, and that's going to take like an hour. So I also wanted to show you that I make these little bacon pods from bacon grease in egg cartons in the freezer. Like when it's cooled down enough to put them in the freezer, I freeze them and then just pop them out and put them in a Ziploc bag, and then you can just throw them in your beans later. So That is for my green beans, and we also going to cook some squash here in a minute.
That's delicious.
The squash was actually just the canned squash that is already seasoned, which I normally don't do, but here I'm just adding a little Cajun power garlic sauce because at this point you're tasting it and figuring out what you want, and Cajun power garlic sauce is delicious. So I threw a little bit of bacon grease and some extra onions into this squash, and I mean, you don't even really need to do that. Those come out of the can pretty much seasoned to perfection. So I just didn't feel like cooking squash from scratch after this whole, 3-hour recipe. But then you add your meatballs and everything. You just pour it onto some rice and serve your sides. And everybody is truly happy with this meal. So now we're just going to watch the game and enjoy it. And everybody was really happy. Everybody loved it.
Delicious.
It's delicious, y'all. It takes time, but it's delicious. Oh, yeah. This is what you get when you live out, with trees and stuff behind your house. I had to chase an armadillo out my yard, so it's just a little lagniappe onto my video. Just a day in the life. Anyway, ça c'est bon, y'all.